Modern men give women the ick, even if they don't want to. They're putting themselves out there, undergoing constant humiliation, constant rejection, without fully understanding why. If you've ever felt that women are a mystery, that no matter what you do, you can never win. If you've felt that you've been dealt a bad hand, that maybe you're too ugly or you don't make enough money, you're not failing. You've been caught up in a structural trap. The crisis of modern relationships is not the result of personal flaws. It is caused by something far more insidious, and we need to understand what it is. Now, I'm clearly not a man, but as a former university professor with an Ivy League PhD who thought theories of gender and sexuality, I spent years researching, teaching, and witnessing how modern men are starving for true recognition. I've dated many men and I've seen firsthand the duress you're under. We need to look at this architecture clearly before it becomes a crisis of epic proportions. The fundamental core masculine values haven't changed. The system surrounding them has. That's why modern dating is a seemingly unsolvable riddle. The real question is how those values can survive in a modern context that treats masculinity as a liability. And listen, both genders are obviously complicit. This is not about excusing one and guilting the other or vice versa. But I'm here to look closely at the male side of the equation. Think about how this actually plays out on a first date. A guy sits across from a woman at a restaurant. He wants so badly to impress her, to be a good guy, do everything right. So when she asks, where are we going next? He smiles gently and says, oh, I don't mind. Wherever you want to go is totally fine with me. Whatever makes you happy. He thinks he's being incredibly polite and accommodating. But across the table, her posture freezes. Her eyes go cold. Her smile becomes slightly more forced. He thinks he's being a gentleman. He thinks he's being safe, while he's completely oblivious to what is actually happening. He just handed her the steering wheel because he was too afraid to drive. And in that single, apparently harmless moment, he triggered what we commonly call the ick. People treat the ick like a joke. They think it's this trivial, shallow whim of modern dating, where a woman suddenly decides she's repulsed by a man because of the way he looks or his bank account. But that is a catastrophic misreading of what is actually happening. The ick is not a joke at all. It's something deadly serious. And what if it isn't about being ugly or poor? What if something inside her perceives something neither of you can explain? You think she's judging your appearance. She's not. You think she's evaluating your income. She's not. Something happens before either of you has formed a conscious thought. And yes, in this equation, women's entitlement is an issue, but it's not what this talk is about. Why does such a small, well-meaning gesture, like letting her choose, cause such a violent romantic recoil? Because it contradicts thousands of years of evolutionary biology. For most of human history, a woman's nervous system evolved to track specific, undeniable traits in a man: perseverance, decisiveness, and localized authorship. The ability to look at options, make a choice, and bear the weight of it. But look at the modern trap. From the schoolroom to the office, men are explicitly trained to suppress their edge, to suppress their vitality. They're rewarded for being risk averse, hyper vigilant, and constantly seeking consensus. Modern men have spent their whole life being trained to be compliant citizens. And then they're utterly blindsided when he goes on a date only to discover that a woman's ancient biology refuses to be attracted to a yes man. This widespread romantic paralysis, of which both men and women are responsible, by the way, is the predictable output of a society that has systematically liquidated the archetype of the hero. In the past, a man's psychological baseline was anchored by an undeniable imperative. He was structurally required to be a protector, an architect of order, and a buffer against chaos. Masculine development was tethered to a functional utility, where raw vitality was demanded by reality itself. A man knew precisely what his strength was for, because without his willingness to face volatility and assume the burden of consequences, the community simply would not survive. This was not an exercise in superficial vanity or unearned dominance. It was a baseline structural requirement for human continuity. But look closely at the modern landscape. We have engineered an environment that has erased male necessity. It begins the moment a young boy steps into a primary school classroom. His natural drive to run, to compete, to test physical boundaries is immediately flagged as a behavioral disturbance. He's told to sit still, fold his hands, do his homework, and wait for permission to speak. He's being conditioned from day one to believe that his raw vitality is a design flaw. By the time he enters the workforce, his domestication is complete. He sits at a desk for 8 hours a day, managing spreadsheets and typing passive-aggressive emails. He avoids conflict at all costs. The modern economy rewards him handsomely for minimizing liabilities and maximizing consensus. He has successfully trained himself to have no sharp edges. He has sacrificed his conviction to buy compliance, and he doesn't even realize that he's done so. Today, our culture leaves no legitimate infrastructure for authentic male heroism. In fact, the very traits that define the heroic impulse, unwavering decisiveness, risk tolerance, localized sovereignty, are treated by modern institutions as administrative liabilities. He's granted total material security, that's what he's chasing most of his life, but he's systemically stripped of his significance. This creates a terrifying internal friction that millions of men endure in absolute silence. The human spirit can withstand immense degrees of physical hardship if that hardship serves a visible, meaningful outcome. What truly deteriorates a man is not the presence of suffering. It is the suffocating weight of feeling completely unnecessary. The sad reality of many modern men is that they come to the realization that if they were to vanish tomorrow, society would grind along without skipping a single beat. No one would notice. The modern man is full of intense internal energy, an evolutionary blueprint designed for high stakes accountability, but he has absolutely nowhere to direct it. He has been entirely domesticated, his teeth filed down by an environment that prefers him harmless. This is the hidden psychological inventory a man today unknowingly carries straight into the dating market. When he's sitting across from a woman at a dinner table at a fancy restaurant, he genuinely believes he's demonstrating his highest evolution by stepping back, refusing to lead, and letting her dictate the trajectory of the evening. He thinks his passivity is a gentlemanly virtue, but he is completely blind to what her nervous system is actually scanning for. A woman's ancient biology does not screen for a perfect compliant citizen who knows how to follow instructions. It screens for a man who possesses an internal center of gravity. Someone who can stand firmly in his own skin, make definitive choices, and bear the weight of whatever happens next. When he abdicates that authority out of a fear of causing offense, she doesn't experience politeness. She experiences an existential vacuum. She senses a man whose heroic edge has been completely hollowed out, and her ancient brain recoils. While he's left completely bewildered, wondering what the heck happened and why the exact same compliance that made him a successful citizen made him totally invisible as a man in the dating pool. When modern men realize they're invisible, they look around the cultural landscape and on the internet for a blueprint, for some rescue signal that tells him how to reclaim his presence. But the civilizational machinery does not offer a path to grounded, authentic masculine maturity. Instead, it presents men with a rigged, highly commercialized binary. Modern culture is dominated by two equally hollow caricatures: the completely deferential nice guy or the cartoonish, hyper-reactive alpha bro. Look at the first trapdoor. The nice guy, this is the man who makes being polite his whole personality. He attempts to bypass the entire problem of masculine edge by erasing his masculinity altogether. Often he even calls himself a feminist. He's hypersensitive, endlessly apologetic, and pathologically agreeable. When he interacts with a woman, he treats her emotional landscape like a minefield, tiptoeing through every conversation, terrified of causing the slightest friction or exhibiting a shred of raw desire. He believes that if he can just prove how safe, harmless, and ideologically pure he is, he will eventually be rewarded with attraction. He has traded his spine for safety without realizing that women are not attracted to a ghost with no purpose or direction other than pleasing others and the system. But then there is a second trapdoor, the violent overcorrection. When men realize the nice guy protocol results in romantic humiliation, they don't look inward. They look for an enemy. And the internet happily serves them a caricature. This is the world of the digital warlords and podcast gurus who preach a bizarre hyper-transactional brand of dominance. They tell young men that the antidote to their invisibility is to become an aggressive, unfeeling machine, to hoard material wealth, view women as adversarial metrics to be conquered, and mask their profound insecurity behind a shield of hyper-masculine posture. It's almost funny to see this hyper-constructed alpha man out in the wild. He walks into a date with his chest puffed out and a very tight shirt, speaking in rigid, rehearsed alpha speak he memorized from a 30-second vertical clip. He treats romance like a boardroom negotiation or a psychological warfare drill. He thinks he's projecting absolute power, but across the table, a woman's intuition cuts through the theater instantly. She doesn't see a powerful man. She sees a deeply wounded, terrified boy wearing a heavy suit of rented armor. Both of these archetypes are magnificent illusions. They're defensive performance art. The nice guy hides his fear behind compliance. The alpha bro hides his fear behind dominance. But if you strip away the polite smile of the bureaucrat and the expensive watch of the internet influencer, you find the exact same underlying pathology. A suffocating existential loneliness born from a total disorientation. It is the deep, quiet panic of a man who realized that modern civilization pushed him out of his own life, leaving him to spend his nights ping-ponging between a spineless passivity that triggers the ick through lack of presence and a brittle, fragile arrogance that triggers the ick through sheer absurdity. Neither archetype possesses true localized authority. Neither knows how to simply stand firmly in their own skin, navigate reality with a quiet masculine confidence, and look at a woman across the table without desperately begging for her validation, either through a submissive apology or an aggressive performance. We're far too deep into the architecture of this crisis for it to undo itself spontaneously. Only a conscious act of will, starting from the individual, will move the needle. For modern men, this act of will requires an existential shift in their entire relationship with reality. The antidote to a life lived like a ghost is not more information, it is weight. It is the conscious, intentional reclamation of the heroic impulse. True heroism was never about grand cinematic spectacles or historical anomalies. True heroism is a functional orientation towards life that can express itself whether you're a firefighter or a stay-at-home dad. It is the moment you look at your immediate environment, locate the heavy responsibility you've been actively avoiding, and willingly step under them. It is keeping your word when avoidance is easier, bearing the consequences of your own choices, and anchoring the space around you when everything else is drifting into chaos. When a man intentionally chooses to carry a burden on purpose, his internal structure changes. He stops floating. The existential disorientation begins to evaporate because he's finally given his internal energy a real world coordinate plane. This is how a man discovers true direction. You do not locate your mission by sitting in a room and thinking about it. You locate it by throwing your weight against reality and seeing what moves. You locate by choosing your burden on purpose. And it is precisely with that movement that you reconnect with an authentic masculine vitality. This is not the fragile, loud dominance of the online influencers, nor is it the toxic overcorrection of a wounded ego. It is quiet, localized authority. It is the return of a healthy, unwavering assertiveness that doesn't need to shout to be felt. It is the capacity to look at options, make a definitive choice, and calmly say, this is the way we're going, without looking around the room to see if everyone approves. It is an internal center of gravity that stands firmly in its own skin, completely comfortable with his own power, yet entirely free of the need to perform. When you cultivate that presence, the entire structure of your romantic life shifts. The next time you sit across from a woman at a restaurant, you're no longer begging for her validation, nor are you a soldier executing a warfare drill. You're simply a man who has reclaimed his jurisdiction. You aren't handling her, the steering wheel, out of fear because you're no longer afraid to drive. And across the table, before a single word is spoken, her nervous system knows that she can trust you. She doesn't see a caricature. She sees a living, grounded reality. The ick disappears because the leadership vacuum has been filled. Hey, thank you for watching. If what I'm sharing resonates with you, make sure you hit subscribe to be notified when new videos are released. And if you want to go deeper, I share longer reflections, frameworks, and updates in my newsletter. The link is below. This channel is a growing body of work about restoring aliveness in a world that quietly trains you to live at a distance from your own life.